I am staying committed to maintaining optimism and looking at the bright side throughout this struggle, but man, do I emphasize the word struggle, as politicians who imposed this stoppage on the American worker are now leveraging his livelihood as hostage in their effort to get their pet election reform and diversity quotas crammed through Congress. I remember a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, when withholding vital aid for political purposes was an impeachable offense. Hopefully this is all resolved by the time I post this video, but who knows? The way this has developed has gone well beyond the political and well into the immoral, in my book. This is like a guy crashing his car through your home and then giving you a list of demands at gunpoint before he'll exchange insurance information. That isn't resolution. That's just more crime. And the frustration continues as the frenzy feasts on anyone who has anything remotely sensible to say throughout this insanity. As of Monday night, the target was Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who appeared on Tucker Carlson's show to consider the possibility that maybe the economic damage we are imposing on ourselves voluntarily is worse than the risk inherent to the disease. How dare he?
No one reached out to me and said, as a senior citizen, are you willing to take a chance on your survival in exchange for keeping the America that all America loves for your children and grandchildren? And if that's the exchange, I'm all in. I want to, live smart and see through this, but I don't want the whole country to be sacrificed. My message is that let's get back to work. Let's get back to living. Let's be smart about it. And those of us who are 70 plus, we'll take care of ourselves, but don't sacrifice the country. Don't do that. Don't ruin this great American dream.
You're basically saying that this disease could take your life, but that's not the scariest thing to you. There's something that would be worse than dying.
Yeah.
The original Twitter post of this clip that I saw from Julian Castro's communications director was shockingly bad at communication, or at least shockingly loose in its paraphrasing. Dan Patrick with his white-hot take that says, "Trust me, old people are willing to die for Wall Street." Honesty like that, I'm sure, is at least part of the reason why his guy Julian Castro was never white-hot anything, if you can even remember him. Couldn't have been a more ice-cold candidate, but this was the characterization that spawned the evening of internet outrage. Dan Patrick is repulsive. Dan Patrick says grandma and grandpa are willing to die for Wall Street. Dan Patrick says it's a grandparent's patriotic duty to die for capitalism. Thus, the hashtag not dying for Wall Street was born. As of Tuesday morning, it was one of Twitter's top trends. Some of the tweets highlighted in this Texas news piece read, "Not one single human being deserves to die for somebody else's stock portfolio. My parents and in-laws are not dying for Wall Street." Is that what he said? That we should wheel grandma into the corona pit as a sacrifice to the stock market gods? Did he even say this should be imposed on anyone? No. He said there are real trade-offs in play, and he offered his opinion about how he would navigate those trade-offs if given the choice. Not that you should be forced to follow him pulling your grandma by shackle and chain. He said there's a real trade-off with protecting certain lives at all costs. And that trade-off is that everyone's life will suffer. And at the rate that we're headed, not just suffer a little bit for the greater good, but suffer immensely to the point that the greater good is just a theory rather than reality. And this narrative that Wall Street is the only thing that's at risk and the only thing that Dan Patrick seeks to protect. No, he says explicitly that his children are his number one priority, and by extension, the small business that he's run to provide for them.
I just think there are lots of grandparents out there in this country, like me, I have 6 grandchildren, that what we all care about and what we love more than anything are those children. Everyone says pretty much the same thing, that we can't lose our whole country. We're having an economic collapse. I'm also a small businessman. I understand it.
In fact, he never even says Wall Street during this entire exchange. Is Wall Street really the only thing that's in danger here? Major sectors of Wall Street are doing just fine, actually. Some are even crushing. Retail giants like Amazon, Walmart, Target, they're all hiring at a massive scale right now. And even those big businesses that are struggling, they'll take a hit, but most of them have the resources to weather a storm. How about your local restaurant? or your local bar run by your neighbor's mom and pop, who are now expected to survive on greatly reduced or even zero revenue for weeks or months? How about any other small Main Street shop in your town whose business has been deemed non-essential and whose livelihood has been severed, and whose only hope now is that the corporate boards of the future will be diverse enough for Nancy Pelosi's liking? Until then, they remain economic hostages. Nobody's worried about whether Wall Street will be fine. We are worried about whether your neighbor and his family will, because when their business closes and they have to take a job at Amazon or Walmart or Target instead, then we really will be altering and destroying lives to the benefit of Wall Street in exactly the way you're warning about. And lastly, I gotta address the broad point about how Dan Patrick's perspective is somehow morally wrong. There is no perspective more morally right. What is the purpose of your life other than leaving a legacy, other than proverbially planting a tree in whose shade you will never sit? What else would you expect a father to say? The reason my dad is a great dad is because I know if it ever came down to it, he would sacrifice everything he has for my future, and I will never pay him back for that. But I will pay it forward to my son. And just like Dan Patrick, I'm speaking for myself here. I'm not giving you direction on how to live your life, but just me personally, if you give me a choice between living 100 years but leaving nothing meaningful behind, or living 50 years and leaving incredible prosperity for my children, that is not a difficult choice for me at all. What Dan Patrick is saying is what any good dad would say, but he's being vilified as a monster for it. And what's most frustrating to me is none of this is actually that sort of dire either or, black or white, this door or that door, mutually exclusive type decision. And Patrick doesn't frame it that way. As he says, I think we can manage both interests. I think we can find a proper balance to preserve all lives and livelihoods, not just some at the total expense of others.
My heart is lifted tonight by what I heard the president say, because we can do more than, one thing at a time. We can do two things.
His perspective is one of compromise. In fact, being presented as though it's inconsiderate, harsh, or absolute. Recreational outrage was already a national pastime on the rise before sheltering in place. Now it's one of only a few pastimes available at all. Here's hoping people get so bored with it that they actually resort to critical thinking instead. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.